So before we launch into today's video, today's background noise will probably be brought to you courtesy of the pup's new toy. So you may hear a funny noise in the background. That's his new favourite toy, which he got yesterday, and which he spends ages, aside from my shoes of course, he will spend ages playing with that. He also has a fish version of that, but I'm not sure if that'll come up on the microphone because it's not as loud as the actual cat toy, the mouse toy. So, on that note, this video is a continuation of what I started ages ago before we got all these new phone calls that came out. So, I did actually cover the Detective Tagler interview with Jenn Soto over a week ago. And I was planning on doing them back to back, and then all of a sudden we had these phone calls drop, and having spent $40 buying the audio for the phone calls, I thought I really need to focus on these now rather than do this one more video and then come back to them. So now we're going back to the states versions of the various interviews. In other words, these are the unredacted versions of the interviews that were done with Jenn and Stephan. As per usual, I will drop the uninterrupted version of this after I put this one out. There is one uninterrupted one that I've just dropped out this morning because I had already done my review of that and somehow overlooked putting that one out, possibly in all the chaos of the phone calls, or also possibly because when I have those uninterrupted ones, I don't drop them all at once because YouTube will only do so many notifications in a day, and there's no point in dropping more videos than that because they just sit there and they do nothing. So this is the interview with my favourite detective. In fact, there are two interviews here with Detective Maira Tagler. And I don't know about you guys, but I am quite looking forward to seeing her come forward as a witness in court, because I think she is just so good at what she does. And of course there is that certain level of satisfaction in seeing Sterns' ass nailed to the wall by a woman. So I can't deny the fact that I thoroughly enjoy that aspect of it, because she well and truly nails his ass to the wall multiple times in this interview. And I just hope that he will be present in court when these detectives are called to testify, because I think he might actually start learning that people don't believe his BS. And it was pretty clear in this interview that Detective Tagler did not believe his BS. Like I said, there are two interviews here. This is the evening when him and Jenn basically sat in the car for 4 hours. This is when they made a phone call to Chris saying, "We need you to come here." We don't know everything that was said in that phone call, but we know that they did contact Chris and ask him to come to Kissimmee. And we know that there was probably more conversation happening between them, although there was probably also a bit of recreational stuff happening at the same time. But I do believe that it was this period of time, when they had that 4-hour break, that they basically sat down and went, okay, we're in trouble, we've got to really hone in on our stories and try and get them right. Now, what's good about looking at these Detective Tagler interviews is that one is at around 7 o'clock in the evening, possibly a little later, I'm not sure, and then the other one is after him and Jenn have been sitting in the car for like 4 hours. So it is after Jenn's interview with Detective Tagler. It occurs at like 1:45 in the morning, I believe. So it's going to be interesting to look at these ones back to back and see if there's a change in what Stephan says between these interviews. And also keeping in mind what Jenn said. Now, I know it's a week since we looked at Jenn's Detective Tagler interview. You may find it worthwhile to go and listen to that one again, back to back with this one. Luckily for you, I do have a semi-didactic memory. So even though it's been a week, I should hopefully remember a lot of what Jenn said. Whether or not I'm remembering the right interview is going to be the issue. So on that note, I think I've yabbered along for way too much. So let's just jump in and have a look at these two Detective Tagler interviews.
Case number 24-11313. Today's date is February 27, 2024. The time is 19:16 hours. We're in Kissimmee speaking with Stephan Sterns. Okay, so I know that you already spoke to the other detective, right, about everything that kind of happened today. If you can just kind of go over it with us one more time, the timeline from like when you guys woke up and took her to school and all that.
So we woke up early. The plan was that we were going to get McDonald's breakfast on the way, so we made amazingly good time getting out the door.
I don't mean to interrupt you, okay? Neither of us were here yesterday, so if you can be kind of like specific about like times and stuff like that, okay?
I love that straight up, within the first minute, she's signalling to him that you need to actually make sure you get your facts straight here because I am onto you. She doesn't want to hear vague crap from him. She wants him to be really specific. And by making him give her times, that's going to, of course, show up his lies so much more. So, and even just her tone of voice. It's a I mean business tone of voice, which I'm thinking for Stephan, especially coming from a female, is probably not what he's used to.
Woke up around 7:15, somewhere around there, which is an early start for us, but we had talked about getting McDonald's breakfast beforehand, so we wanted to make good time. We did make good time. We got out the door maybe 7:30ish, 7:45ish maybe. Got over to that area. She was asleep in the car most of the time, just snoozing until we got there. We got to McDonald's. We're close to McDonald's. I said, "You still want it?" She wasn't interested in the McDonald's anymore, so we continued on.
So, I have a question. How many of you out there have promised your kids that you're going to take them to Macca's, and then just before you get there, you say, "Do you still want it?" I'm guessing there's probably no one who's going to say, "Yeah, I've done that before." Because most of the time, if you say, "Well, let's go to Macca's for breakfast," you're not going to nearly get there and ask, "Do you still want it?" Yeah, the pup's playing. In what universe? Especially given that this was going to be her breakfast. So you would be, if you were a responsible adult, wanting to make sure that she did get breakfast. Now, I don't buy the Danish story. He just came up with that randomly because he was being questioned. But honestly, do you still want it? In what universe?
And she wanted to be dropped off a little down the ways from the school. She's got this phase that she's been into lately where she's very particular about what car she's seen getting out of in front of the school. She prefers her mom's car, but my cars are, I guess, kind of hoopties.
Now, I hadn't actually noticed that before. He's adapted his narrative. Before, it was always, she didn't like his car because it was a hoopty. Can I change that when I talk about it? I can't stand saying that word because it's just ridiculous. But, you know, according to him, she's always said his car is a bomb and she doesn't want to drive in that car. He's adapted it now and saying his cars, plural, are bombs. Basically, he's realised that, hang on, this is the first time I've actually brought this car with me. And even though no one seems to have questioned him at that point about the fact that that car isn't his usual car, you can hear that he's actually thought about it and adapted his story to say that his cars, plural, both of them, are bombs. They're old clunkers. So that's interesting. And on that note, I just want to thank all of you for absolutely confusing the heck out of me, because there's one camp of people who are, well, a Lincoln is a luxury car. It's not an old clunker that Maddie would be embarrassed to see in. It's still a luxury car. 14-year-old car? Yeah, well, I don't know. And there is a group of you who have told me that, yeah, even though it's a luxury car, because of its age, it's still an old clunker. So I don't know what to think anymore. I do know that in Australia, if we think about our equivalents, if I were to think luxury cars, you would think Audi, BMW, all those fancy European cars. When I was Maddie's age, I had a friend whose mother had a old Beamer. Actually, it was an old Mercedes. And it was an old car. But because it was a Mercedes, it was still a fancy car. So, I don't know. I'm really, really thoroughly confused. So, congratulations for confusing me on that one. That's totally irrelevant. I just thought I'd give you all a bit of a chuckle, letting you know that you've just completely done my head in.
I get it. It's an image thing. But that was sometime probably between 8:20 and 8:40-ish. Somewhere in there. It was along this stretch of the road that on the right side that has all the communities on it. Before you get to the overpass. You could see the overpass from where it was. So it was on that side, on that stretch of road, and that's where I dropped her off.
Now, I think I said this with Jen's interview with Detective Tagler also, but I would love to see a body-worn camera video of this. Although I think they must have been sitting in a vehicle while they did this, so it probably wouldn't show Stephan's face. Because what is happening here, and I love it, you hear Detective Tagler every time, it's just like, and that's all the affirmation she's giving them in terms of their stories. And both Jenn and Stephan, you hear them get partway through their story and pause because they're not getting the confirmation that they require, which is so often what you see when people are basically making up a story. They need to know that the audience is buying it. And if they're not getting the visual cues or the verbal cues, it throws them off. Jen's pauses were longer than Stephan's, but you'd still get these pauses from Stephan where he's not getting the cues from Detective Tagler to tell him that she believes his story. So he's pausing, and then it's throwing him off. And what he's doing is then trying to add even more details. So by sitting there and just going, she's basically giving him enough rope to hang himself. And it's such a good strategy.
She said she was going to go wait for her friends. She was going to go find them and hang out and wait for her friends. And I asked if that was going to be okay. She said, yeah, it's fine. kids get dropped off early enough as it is. It's not totally unusual for that to happen. It's just not usually that early that I drop her off. I do school runs every once in a while for her. I said, okay, let her out, have a good day, love you, thanks, love you too. And I turned around and was driving away and was watching her in my rearview mirror to make sure that she was going where she was supposed to go. And she was moving in that direction, but she was rummaging around in her backpack or something. What I assumed was probably headphones or something like that, but I found out later that she forgot her phone here, so she may have been rummaging for her phone. But she was still kind of making her way towards that direction, so it looked okay. Looked like any other day. And I just continued on.
Okay. When you said you dropped her off, like, in the area, kind of like where exactly did you drop her off?
So if you pull down the street going towards the school, you've got that whole strip of communities on the right side there. It was in that stretch of sidewalk there. We pulled in and maybe about halfway up the street or so, and she was like, right here's good.
Was it like in one of the apartment complexes, the church?
Not in, it was outside one of the apartment. It was just on the sidewalk on the side of the road there. Just like a tuck and roll, you know?
So because this obviously didn't happen, he hasn't got any sort of accurate visual in his head to give her. So he has to be really vague about it. And she's trying to get him to be more specific. She's trying to get him to home in. And he just can't. And then he throws in the tuck and roll to give the impression that it was just a real quick, just stopping randomly anywhere on the side of the road, and she just hopped out and took off. Meaning that he wasn't in that spot for long enough to see where he was. This actually contradicts his other stories where he claims that they sat there and had this conversation and, you know, love you too, all that bull crap. And then, you know, that he sat there and watched her walk down the street. Well, my concept of tuck and roll is basically, let me out here, see you later, I'm gone. And also, you know, tuck and roll also gives the impression that he stopped somewhere where he probably couldn't stop and stay, meaning that he probably just stopped and drove off. So he's giving a different version of the story here.
Okay, so like if I were to be on the road, where,
Pull up the maps.
like, what do you remember seeing that you dropped her off at?
I remember the overpass is up ahead. The sidewalk was on the right, row of trees. There was, I think, a median in the middle. And then there was another community maybe across from that before you get to the church. So it was like before the church.
So Town Loop Boulevard's that street that connects to the school.
Yeah.
Is that the street that you...
Is this, which one?
So that's Town Loop Boulevard, right? That's the one
yes.
that...
And where's the school located here?
The school's right here.
School's right there. Okay, so the school would be on the left in this case. Here's the overpass
So you guys came from this
about.
side?
Yeah, we came from Town Loop, I think, which is Town Center. Yeah, so we made a right here and then pulled somewhere about.
So you came from Town Center and turned onto Town Loop.
Yeah, where's the church? Is this the church here?
So don't forget that at this point in time, they've now discovered that footage from the church. And Jenn and Stephan both know that. So now that they're pressuring him to actually say precisely where he dropped Maddie off, he's trying to adapt his narrative to include the church into it. As far as he's concerned, he needs to say that he dropped her off somewhere near the church so that it fits with the whole story of her hanging around the church. Of course, what he doesn't know is that the footage actually showed a vehicle going into the church car park and dropping someone off, and it didn't show his vehicle. So they already know at this point in time that it wasn't his vehicle or that it wasn't him. And him being super vague about where he dropped her off, not a good thing.
That's
so,
the
yeah.
church.
Okay, so we weren't up to the church yet. So we were pulled onto here, and then we pulled maybe about halfway up here, and I dropped her off somewhere in this area here.
And she walked from there to the school?
Yeah.
It's a pretty long way.
It's maybe a block or so, but it's not out of the ordinary for her. She likes to do that sometimes. She likes the cold weather. She was wearing her hoodie. She likes the cold walks.
So you dropped her off near Lilac? Does that sound right?
Yeah, it wasn't at a cross street. It was just a bit of the sidewalk there.
So did you merge into the sidewalk, or did you stop in the middle of the street, or?
I just pulled over to the sidewalk there and let her hop out.
How often do you drop her off?
This might be the 5th or 6th time I've ever done it.
Okay.
So previously he had basically said that he'd only done it once or twice. And now, having compared stories with Jen, clearly, he's now done it 5 or 6 times. Of course, we know from Maddie's friends and from one of the flatmates that he had never dropped off Maddie before. So the whole story about her not liking his car because it was an old clunker is BS, of course. And now this whole thing of having dropped her off 5 or 6 times, we know that also is complete utter BS.
Okay, and when you drop her off, where do you normally drop her off at?
Normally down the street from the school. She requests that a lot.
Like the same area or somewhere else?
Especially if it's sometimes in the church parking lot, sometimes just wherever she tells us to let her out. As long as it's close, you know.
So it's halfway between Town Loop and Town Center and the church?
Yeah, it's just in this stretch right here. Like we got about maybe halfway up and it was there.
They've got him completely backed into a corner there, especially after asking how many times have you dropped her off, and he claims 5 or 6 times. They want to know where he normally drops her off, because, you do. You have a routine. If you drop someone off somewhere regularly, then there's usually a spot that is a good spot to pull over and drop them off. So you are always going to drop them off in the same spot. I can remember visiting my cousins at one time. So I was staying at their place for about a week, and my cousin's wife had to go to work a few days. So I would take her car and drop her off. I dropped her off in the same spot every time, and we had an agreed pickup spot. So that's just what normal people do. So they basically backed him into a corner here by asking him, where do you normally drop her off? Because he can't even give a clear answer for that.
The McDonald's that you guys were going to stop at, did you pull into the plaza at any point?
No, she 86'd the idea before we even got there.
What do you mean by 86?
Poo-pooed the idea, didn't want it anymore.
Okay.
Wasn't in the mood anymore.
So I actually think, especially now that we've seen or listened to all the phone calls, I actually think that the language he uses is actually kind of like older person language that probably his mother uses. Because it just is really, it's odd language. She poo-pooed the idea. She 86'd it. They're sort of things I would actually expect to hear out of Deb Stern's mouth, actually. So I think it's interesting hearing him speak like that, and I think it's starting to give us a picture of the sort of relationship that him and Deb have, because he even takes on her language patterns. We all adapt our language patterns based on who we are interacting with. So, I can remember when I was growing up, my best friend, her family comes from the UK. So there were a few pronunciations of things that she was born in the UK, but she moved here when she was like 18 months old or something. But because her parents both have these strong British accents, there were still some things that she said a bit differently. And because we spent so much time together, I would say things that way as well. Because she was one of the greatest influences on my speech patterns. Even as an adult, when I've shared an office space with people and you speak to them 5 days a week in your break times or whatever, you start to adopt the same speech patterns. So for him to be adopting speech patterns which I believe sound like what an older person would use, it says to me that these probably are speech patterns adopted from his mother, and that she is probably one of the people that he spends most of his time with. What does that tell you about their relationship?
At any point while you were driving to the school, did you make a U-turn?
Yeah, I tried to sell her on McDonald's one more time because I was still kind of hungry, but at that point she was also just wanting to get to school.
Okay,
so
we
turned right back around.
Where did you make that U-turn at?
Actually, the school park, not the school parking lot, the church parking lot.
Now, this guy is quick on one hand to respond to verbal cues. She's asked him if he did a U-turn at any point in time, which is basically signalling to him, we've got you on camera doing a U-turn. And he picks up on that pretty quickly and says, yeah, I did. But then he's just not quick at figuring out how to adequately answer that in terms of where he would have done that U-turn. So now he's getting a bit confused. Oh, it was the church car park. Oh, no, it wasn't. Or, the school car park. No, it wasn't there. It was, he had no idea what he was trying to say there because he couldn't visualise where he could have done that U-turn.
I pulled into that, turned around and pulled back out. Did a U-turn there and went back to the McDonald's, and she still wasn't having it, and that's when we came back. See, the McDonald's is on the same town loop or town center. It connects to the same road that the
school's on.
Yeah, so it's like a straight shot.
So you guys came from, just so I can kind of get a good visualization, town center, and where did you come from, town center?
Town center, so where's the McDonald's? I'm so bad at reading these, I'm sorry.
The guy would have to be the biggest moron on the planet. They have already signalled to him that they don't believe his BS. He realises that because he's responded to their question about a U-turn. So he realises the need to adapt his story. And yet, when he's trying to describe things here, instead of offering up visual cues, he's saying, I don't read these maps very well. Well, okay, if you are that reliant on the map, you're actually telling detectives that you are lying. Because you should actually have in your head visuals. If I were to go down into town here in Bendigo and go to the noodle store, I would be able to tell you, looking at a map, where it was that I turned around to come back this other way. Of course, we have parking in the middle of the road in a lot of the streets in town. So at the end of the row of parking, before you get to the end of that particular block, you can leap through and go the other way. So that's easy to remember. But regardless of that, if I was somewhere, you don't just do a U-turn or whatever and not look for where it would be safe to do so. Meaning that you are going to be totally aware of your surroundings. You're not going to be as vague as what he is. But what does he do? Instead of saying, oh, hang on, I'm just having trouble finding the things on the map that I know were there, essentially, he's saying, I'm not good at reading these maps. Well, you don't have to be good at reading the maps. You have to just be able to see the thing that you know was there where you did your U-turn. For example, if you did a U-turn in the church car park, you look for the church on the map. I have to say, all this going through the maps for me is one of the most tedious parts of the Stephan Sterns interviews, because it is so frustrating and it is so obvious that he's got no idea what he's saying or what he should be saying.
So we
This
came.
is all town center.
So we came across on Town Loop, I believe. Is that the school that is that the road that the school is on?
No, this is town center. So you
Okay.
said you were on town center, and then you made a right on town loop, which is
Yeah.
the one that takes you to the school,
Yes, correct.
right?
I think you passed it.
But what I'm saying is before town loop, or I'm sorry, for town center, what street did you take?
I'm so sorry. I'm bad with the streets around here.
How do you usually get to the school?
I just take John Young and then wait till I see the McDonald's and make a left there, and then follow that around, and that goes straight into the road that the school is on. I just use the landmarks, and I don't memorize the street names.
He truly is a dumbass, isn't he? I just use the landmarks, I don't know the street names. Well, dude, you've just been really, really vague about the spot where you turned around, about the spot where you dropped her off. Well, that to me sounds like someone who doesn't particularly know the landmarks in the area. So every time you open your mouth, you're basically showing how much of a liar you are. It must have been a really, really frustrating interview for these detectives, because they would have been able to hear what was going on. And they keep trying to give him a chance to either get it right or shoot himself in the foot, and every single time he shoots himself in the foot.
Is that JYP?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is JYP.
I mean, at the McDonald's you turn right?
And then you said you made a left at the McDonald's? So that's Jung Young Parkway, you're going north
left
on
at
Jung Young?
McDonald's, and then go around, and then that shoots straight into the road that she's on.
Okay. Because that's...
I believe that's the correct road.
Was that a bit of guilty leakage there? He's giving them all these vague directions, whatever he's talking about here. And then he goes, and that leads through to the road that she's on. Well, if he's referring to a highway there, then yes, it does lead through to where she's at. Given that he knows that she didn't go to school, I actually do think that he was actually referring to basically where he dropped her, where he took her. So that's interesting, and I wonder if they used that as part of their search before they got the other information from cameras, or if they already had the information from cameras at this point. So they realised that he was actually referring to where he took her.
Yeah, well, that's the fastest way to get there, but you told me you came from town center and town loop.
I'm sorry, I don't know the street names.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So
I'm doing my
no,
best.
that's
So this is a response that he goes to a few times in these interviews. I'm doing my best. This time round, he makes it sound like, poor me, I'm doing my best. And it's probably a strategy that he used through throughout his life with his parents, when they nailed him for something, he probably learnt that if he put on that, Suki La La voice, I'm doing my best, that they would back off. The detective has totally nailed him here, and he knows it. Because he said, you've said you came from this direction. Why are you saying you came from this direction now? And Stephan's got no excuse for that, because he was apparently looking at the map when he was describing his route. Meaning that when they questioned him and nothing fitted together, as soon as they turned around and pointed out that he lied, he's backed into a corner, and his only response is to turn around and go, I'm doing my best. Which is essentially him going, I lied, you caught me, but please don't be angry with me, because I'm a poor little 8-year-old boy that doesn't like getting into trouble.
Okay, so now that we know that you came from Jungyung Parkway and you made a left on Town Loop, so you passed the McDonald's.
Yeah, that was when she said no to McDonald's the first time.
Okay, so you guys keep on going on Town Loop.
Yeah, but at that point we still had a lot of time to kill.
They all use that phrase, and honestly, I find it so incredibly triggering. Every time I hear it from Jen, from Chris, from Stephan, about having time to kill. Honestly, it does sound to me like leakage.
Very early.
So what did you guys do?
Drove towards the school, made a U-turn, came back, tried to do the McDonald's thing again. She didn't want it.
So where did you do the U-turn at?
It probably was right by the church, because it was still way too early for school.
I'm not even going to try and figure out what places he's just said in terms of the different places that he's said that he did the U-turn, because he's got no idea what he's saying, for starters. But you can tell that he's trying to adapt the narrative as he goes along. He is cunning enough, and I think cunning is the right word, to recognise that when they re-question him about something, that there's a problem with his narrative. And this probably goes back to when you look at the phone calls that we've just heard, and you listen to the way that Chris questioned him. Chris used to use this same sort of technique about things, basically questioning Stephan's lies. So I think Stephan has learnt over time that if they come back and question about what you've said, they don't believe you. You've got to alter your story. And that's basically what he's attempting to do here.
So it was on that stretch of road. I mean, they had the meeting there in the separation, so that left turn where the church is, you could make the U-turn there.
And then after you dropped her off, what did you do?
Stayed, talked to her for a minute, made sure, is it all right that you're going early? Because it was still early. She said, yeah, it's fine. I'm going to hang out and wait for my friends to get there, which she does sometimes, so it didn't.
Now, we've seen so many cases where people forget their lies from one interview to the next. But he's forgotten what he said earlier. He tells them it was a tuck and roll kind of situation. And now he's saying that he stopped and he chatted to her for a while before she got out. So, and of course these detectives are so onto him. So he's basically lied to them outright. Well, we know he was lying all along, because this is whole one big fabrication. But the problem is, he's just not got the capacity to come up with a credible lie. And that's why, I've said this in previous videos, I think that Jen did actually play a role in coming up with this alibi. Because there are some parts where the story is solid. And then there are these parts that rely just on Stephan for the retelling. And he's all over the place. He can't come up with consistent answers.
It didn't sound, outrageous or anything. That was it. Told her to have a good day. I loved her. She told me she loved me too. I turned around to leave, and I was watching her in my rearview mirror, and she looked like she was walking in the right direction. She was rummaging in her bag a little bit, like I said, but still sort of just shambling in the right direction while she was doing it.
Well, it certainly doesn't sound much like a tuck and roll situation to me there, the way he's describing it.
So it looked normal. It looked okay.
Sure, it looked normal to you, Stephan, even though you've actually never dropped her off at school. So your idea of normal probably doesn't actually match with what is or was normal for Maddie. Of course, in this interview, he's claimed that he's done it for 5 or 6 times, so I guess he can claim that it looked normal, because apparently she's rummaged around in her bag those 5 or 6 times that he's dropped her off. Well, here's the thing. When we listened to the interviews with Jenn, and they honed in and asked, what does Maddie normally do in the car when you drop her off? And she's talking about listening to music, or she might be doing something on her phone. So actually, her rummaging in her bag when you drop her off probably isn't overly normal, because you're trying to give the impression that she was searching for her phone. Are you trying to say that of these 5 or 6 times that you dropped her off, they just happened to be the times when she conveniently forgot to take her phone? There's so many holes in his story, it's ridiculous.
Okay, and then what did you do after you left the area?
I left to go to the local vape shop because I needed some more vape juice. They weren't quite open yet, so I ended up going back home.
Okay, so just a quick observation before we move on. He's claiming here that basically he dropped Maddie off, he went to the vape store, but it wasn't open, so he went home. The thing is, there appears to be no evidence of him having gone to the vape store. When you go through and look at all the different bits of camera footage that they've got, when you go to that part of the document and you go through each intersection that he was caught at, you can see that basically he spent that entire morning driving around. Yes, he returned back at that point when the key fob wasn't working, and someone made a really good observation the other week that possibly he was nervous and he returned to collect his firearm, because we know that he ended up having that in the boot of the car, in the trunk of the car, sorry, and then when the officers were at their townhouse that night, it had been moved onto the back seat of the car because he said he had it in the trunk when he got his flat tyre. So it is possible that he did return for the firearm. It is also possible that he may have noticed that he was missing one of Maddie's Crocs. Maybe when he carried her out, one fell off, and maybe that's how it ended up back over on the pile of shoes. Maybe Jenn didn't get that note about the Crocs, and maybe she actually moved the Croc there herself. Although my personal opinion is that Jenn wouldn't bother, if she saw something of Maddie's lying around, she wouldn't bother to pick it up herself. But just a random thought.
About an hour or so, and then went back and checked the vape shop again. It was open, so I got what I needed there, and came back.
Do you remember what time you came home?
The first time was probably right around 10, close to it. And then I waited here and went back to the vape shop. Probably finished at the vape shop and came back home again a little after 11.
What's interesting here is that he's far less vague with his times. In actual fact, he returned to the townhouse at 10:14, and then he left the townhouse again sometime probably about 5 minutes past 11, because he was at the vape store at 11:22. So the second half of his time there doesn't quite match, but at least he's kind of in the ballpark with these times this time round. Yes, he did get home at around 10 the first time round. He got back from the vape store closer to 12. So I believe it was about 10 to 12 that he got back from the vape store. So he's not quite accurate there, but still less vague than all these other times he gives for things that actually never happened. And yet, one of the excuses he constantly uses is that he is time blind. Well, he wasn't that time blind in this particular instance. And you'll hear that too with other things throughout, where things that actually did happen, he will give you pretty close to the exact time.
Okay. You said the first time that you hung out was a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Was here when you got here at
Yes.
10? Okay.
I think so. She might have been at her blood appointment. Let me double check. I know she had a blood appointment at some point during the day.
It's okay. We don't have to ask her right now.
Sorry, everything's a blur.
So she might have been here. She might have not have been here
I
the first time.
believe she was here because she was sleeping in as much as she possibly could because she's been messed up with a new work schedule. So she had to be here because she didn't want to sleep in.
Okay.
I'll double check, but yeah, I believe she was here.
And then
I just wish one detective had have asked either Jen or him why they believed that they were both at the townhouse when Jen got back from her appointment, because that didn't happen. Jen arrived at the townhouse after he had gone to the vape store. He wasn't there. What's interesting in this interview is that they ask him if Jen was at the townhouse, and he actually gives the right answer at first, that he thinks she was still at her blood appointment. But then he's like, well, I need to check. And it sounds like from the way she responded that he must have been planning on ringing or phoning Jen because he'd picked his phone up. And she's like, it doesn't matter right now. And then he's actually works it back and was like, actually, no, because she wanted to have a bit of a sleep in. So, yeah, she was there when I got home. So it's almost like he's forgotten that part of the story and he's had to dial it back a bit. And then he's gone, oh, okay, no, we did agree that we were both there. Because it seems to be something that they have both stuck to. Whenever they have basically adapted their narratives, every single interview they still stick to him being at the townhouse when Jen gets back from her appointment, which is not the case. So I don't know why they did that, why it was important. But I just find it interesting that at first he admitted that she wasn't there and she was at her blood appointment. And then he dials it back. And I honestly think he did that because he realised that that's not what they had agreed on. Because think about it. They've both established that the place where they hang out is Jen's room. So if Jenn was having a sleep-in when he got back from running around, well, he would have been heading into Jen's room. They established that in every single one of their narratives. Jen's version of when she got back from her appointment was he was sitting in her room sitting at the desk in her room on his phone, because that's just what they normally do. They normally hang out in their room. So they have well and truly established that the pair of them hang out in Jen's room. And yet he's coming up with this story that, he thinks that she was there because she wanted to sleep in. Well, you're gonna know. You're gonna have that visual in your head of walking in the door and seeing that Jenn was still there and still asleep. And hey, wouldn't you think she would wake up anyway if you got back at 10:15 in the morning, given that supposedly by that time she will have had something like 11 hours sleep. Also given that she woke up the moment you went into the room to collect the dog supposedly earlier in the day. So you're telling me that you have absolutely no recollection of whether or not she was asleep, but you think she was, because you know that she wanted to sleep in. No. The problem you're having here, Stephan, is you can't remember what was agreed on in terms of that part of the narrative. So it will be interesting to see when they re-interview him, if they go back to this, and to see what he says.
What time did you say you left again to the smoke shop?
Maybe after an hour or so, maybe 11 or so.
Okay. And then what time did you get to the smoke shop?
It's maybe 10 minutes away, so not long after that. I stopped in and got some juice.
So she focuses him back on what time he left to go to the vape store. And this time he gives the time that he would have actually left. He said he was there for about an hour. And that would fit, because if he got back to the townhouse at around 10:15, and it's about a 15-minute drive to the vape store, he was there at 11:22, so yeah, he would have left shortly after 11. So he was there for roughly an hour, probably about 50 minutes, on his own, without Jenn, before heading off again to go to the vape store. So again, we have factual information here where suddenly Stephan is not time blind. I wonder if the detectives did actually pick up on that, if at this point in time they had enough data to know what time he was at the vape store and to know what time he had returned to the apartments. Well, yeah, we know that they do have that data because they question him about returning at a little bit after 9 or a little bit after 8, whenever it was he returned. So they already know that he had returned at 10:14. I believe he returned via the back gate. They would also know precisely what time he left, regardless of whether or not they've got info from the vape store. They would definitely know the gate times for the townhouse because they address that in this interview.
What's the name of the smoke shop?
East Monroe Line.
Okay.
It's just over off of John Young. It's not far from the school.
And then after the smoke shop, what did you do?
Came home again.
Okay, for how long?
At least until maybe 12:30, 12:45-ish, something like that.
Again, this is all factual information that he's giving them now. He went to the vape store and then he returned directly to the townhouse, where he was there for about 50 minutes, and he left again at roughly 12:45. So he's been quite clear with his answers here. And can I just mention, with regards to his phone calls and him claiming that he suffered a catastrophic mental breakdown after he discovered Maddie? Well, right now, him being able to give accurate times of things that he did actually do definitely does not point towards a catastrophic mental breakdown. But basically here you have him giving factual information. He's given the exact name of the vape store so that they can check up and they can see they get him on camera. He tells them what time he left again, because he knows that he did actually leave at that time again. He doesn't have to try and hide that big block of time like he did in the morning.
And then what'd you do after that?
I had a couple errands to run over on 192. She was talking about making a BJ shopping list. She just wanted to make sure I was back in time for us to both go pick up.
I wonder if he was so caught up in trying to give his story in relation to Maddie that when he goes she and then he pauses, that he was going to say something about Maddie and then realised that Maddie should have been at school at that point in time, not travelling around in the trunk of the Lincoln. But then he does a quick recovery with that and says she was talking about making a BJ's shopping list. Now, I'm going to presume that BJ's is some sort of shopping centre, like a supermarket or something. It's not something that we have in Australia, so I'm not familiar with it. But I just find it interesting that he was going to say something about either Maddie or Jen and stopped himself and then came out with this story of she was talking about making a BJ's shopping list. This is the one and only time we've heard this. So it definitely sounds to me like he accidentally made a mistake, he misspoke, and he just came up with the first thing in his head that he could to cover for the fact that he wasn't meant to say that.
So I was visiting some card shops around the area on 192. I'm kind of a nerd, so we had a new trading card game release, and I was seeing what the situation was with it.
Do you remember what places you visited?
Yeah, Coliseum of Comics. Stopped by a couple Targets, and I was going to go to House Rules Games down by Oak and 192, but I didn't make it that far. I got a flat tire on the way.
I think it definitely gives us a clear picture of just how much money he spent on unnecessary things, because he's able to name a whole bunch of places that actually he didn't go to, but that he claims to have gone to. And he really didn't seem to require much thought to do so. So it sounded like he basically went, well, if I was actually going to get these things, where would I go to get them? These are the places I would go. And then, of course, he has to add in the bit about the flat tyre, because that just fits in with the whole story perfectly, of course. It's his explanation of why he didn't go with Jen to pick Maddie up, and of course it's his explanation for the injuries on his hands, and of course also his way of trying to get sympathy, because it seems that for Stephan, if there's something like an injury like that, then he's desperate to get sympathy from anybody he can for his little boo-boos.
Do you remember where you got your flat tire?
It was on 192. I pulled into one of those plazas somewhere. It's been about 10 years since I switched out a tire, though, so I made a lot of rookie mistakes, and Ended up pinning my thumb between the frame and the
no.
jack. Yeah, I'm lucky it's not a lot worse than it could have been.
It's such a dumb story to come up with, because anyone with half a brain knows that if you get your finger caught between the frame of the car and the jack, well, you're going to, at the very least, have some deep tissue damage. But more than likely, you're going to end up with a crushed finger and be in the emergency room. So to try and claim that these scratches on his fingers came from the jack is just ridiculous. And I wonder if this gives us some idea of the sort of ridiculous stories that he could tell his parents and get away with. Because he seems to be quite confident when he tells this story. But you'd have to be a fool to believe him.
Remains to be seen if I'll keep
Do you
my
remember the
thumb
name
down.
of the plaza by any chance?
I don't.
Do you remember like what stores were in this
It
plaza?
was like right before you got to Oak though, so it was one of those little strips.
Okay. And then
but I did
after
not
that?
make it back in time because of that. I thankfully had the spare. I put that on and tried to get back in time, but caught every red light on the way.
Now that's interesting. I don't know what the mumbling was that he was saying after talking about getting his finger caught in the jack before she questioned him about where was it that you changed the tyre. What's really interesting here, and I'll come back to the location, the supposed location, but what's really, really interesting here is that she's starting to direct the conversation in a different way. She's about to ask him another question, and he has to jump in and say that he didn't make it back in time to go with Jenn. That is clearly an important part of their shared story for some reason. And it makes me think that it was arranged that they would present this united front of heading to the school to pick up Maddie. And maybe because Stephan believed he was so credible, maybe Jenn was going to send him into the school to question where Maddie was. But because he didn't get back on time and she had to go on her own, she didn't have the guts to do it. Hence the reason she took off after 6 minutes. But he was determined there to make sure that he included that part of the narrative. Now, of course, as for asking where he did it, he once again gives a really vague answer. One of those moles off this particular spot. So he's obviously referring to an area that's got lots of different moles, and he thinks this is a good spot to say that that happened, which is ridiculous because then you would expect there would be multiple witnesses. I mean, if that occurred in Australia, you'd probably have half a dozen people who would want to offer to help you change your tyre. But to claim that he's not really sure which one it is, when he's basically said earlier that he basically finds places based on what he can see, meaning he's a visual person, so he should actually remember exactly what the mole looked like where he changed his tyre.
She ended up leaving to pick up Maddie without me. I was about 10 minutes late on it. So I called her and let her know what happened. Apologized profusely because I had promised I'd be there with her to go pick her up.
I really don't understand why he claims to have apologised profusely to Jenn. Sure, if you were meant to be someone's plus one at a wedding or something, and something happened and you didn't make it there on time, then you might apologise profusely because you've embarrassed them and you've put them out a bit. But just to be late so that you can't go for a drive in the car with them to pick up their daughter from school and then turn around and come back home again? That seems like an overreaction to me, to say that he apologised profusely. Meaning that maybe it was super important for him to be there with Jen when she went to pick up Maddie. Well, if this was a standard pickup, it wouldn't need to be super important, would it? So I do think that it was meant to be part of the whole alibi. If we put on a united front and we both act like we're completely surprised that she's not at school, that's going to be more credible than just Jen turning up to pick up Maddie. Because after all, Stephan was the one who was supposed to have dropped Maddie at school. So him going with Jen reinforces the idea that he believes that he dropped her off at school.
Just sat and waited. After that, she had already gone to get her, so I just sat and waited and hung out, straightened up the house a little bit. And that was it. Then we got the call.
What do you mean you got the call?
Detective Tagler pounced like a snake there. She knew that sounded wrong. And he probably realised the moment she pounced on him that it sounded wrong. Sat around and waited, and then I got the call. Because when you talk about when I got the call, it does sound like it was planned. Obviously, he couldn't go with Jen. He knew to expect Jen to ring him at some point in time to signal him that, hey, I've been to the school and done my part. And of course, Maddie wasn't there. Or if we are to believe that Jen is innocent in all this, then he still would have been expecting the call from Jen to say, I went to the school and Maddie didn't turn up, Maddie didn't come out. Either way, it makes him look guilty as.
Called to her that Maddie had not come out. So we started getting worried. Started making the calls to her family, be on the lookout, she might be walking to you.
Again, this definitely seems to indicate that they haven't really got their stories knuckled down yet. Because he didn't make any phone calls to family to let them know that Maddie might be walking in their direction. We know from all the phone data that basically Jen left the school and went to Yolanda's office. Nobody contacted Stephan until around the time when Jen's family finally decided to call 911, which was much later than that. So Stephan is basically trying to imply that Jen actually rang him as soon as she realised that Maddie didn't come out of the school, but that didn't happen. He was an afterthought, which of course looks really bad for Jen because then makes her look guilty, because wouldn't you ring the last person that should have seen your daughter? Did you drop Maddie off at school? Where did you drop her off at school? Did you see her go into the school? Those sorts of questions, which we never had from Jen. But him to say that he was calling family members and say, be on the lookout, she could be headed your way. Well, the only family member that who she could be headed that way towards would be Yolanda, because Stephanie lives just round the corner from Jen. One was staying with Stephanie. I don't know where Letitia or any of the others live, but we know that Maddie didn't go to their places after school. She only ever went to Yolanda's office. So Stephan is just so full of crap here.
that's just when everything sort of started going downhill.
Now, the treatment that Stephan's getting there is not what he is accustomed to. He's just given them this long story of, Jen calling him and then him calling family members because it makes him sound like the responsible parent type. And there's silence. They know that that's BS. So they're actually probably still looking at roots and stuff like that. Either way, they don't respond immediately to his little story. So then he needs to fill in the gaps. And he goes, and that's when everything started going downhill. Well, no, Stephan, if you look at it logically, if you were innocent and Jen was innocent, wouldn't you consider that everything started going downhill sometime after you dropped Maddie off? To me, this sounds like he's tried to fill in the silence, and he's just come out with this without thinking about what he was saying. Because essentially everything did start going downhill at this point in time, because him and Jen didn't have their stories together. Jen ran around like a headless chook, doing all the things that a mother normally wouldn't do, instead of going into the school and asking where Maddie was. And then things did start to fall apart because suddenly people were questioning Jen and Stephan. And Stephan wasn't getting the answers right.
I wasn't.
Did you check on the map the southbound? The Greenville? I'm not sure where Greenville is. I noticed, I'm sorry, that she forgot her phone, right? Is it normal for her to not have her phone?
Unfortunately, she's severely ADHD, as am I and her mother. So it is not uncommon at all, and in fact, very, very usual thing for her to forget things. She'd forget her head if it wasn't screwed on.
Okay, the comment of her being severely ADHD, as am I and her mother, just sends me through the roof every time. First of all, when he says severely ADHD, to me, it makes me think of someone saying someone is severely disabled. It's got that negative connotations to it. Now, I will tell you that in terms of my ADHD, I tick all the boxes in terms of combined attention deficit hyperactivity. So I would say I am like ADHD to the max. But I wouldn't say I am severely ADHD, because I don't see my ADHD as a bad thing. Sure, sometimes it does make life harder for me, and it is recognised as a neurological disability. But to say severely ADHD, I don't like the connotations that come from hearing that. But then he has to try and make himself like Maddie. Just like me and her mum, we're peas in a pod. He has to insert himself into every single element of Maddie's life, and that makes me angry. I know it shouldn't matter, but it is just this. It bugs me. It really bugs me.
And we're forgetful about, writing her about that. We'll remind her, and then it will leave our mind, and she'll say okay, and then it will leave her mind.
Okay, well, we need to acknowledge first that Maddie wasn't in the habit of forgetting her phone. But this whole thing of, I'd remind her and then she'd forget, it would leave her mind and then it would leave our mind. Well, no. Because if you have enough of a fixation on reminding someone of something, or this is at least how my ADHD brain works, you don't let go of it. When we were kids, my sister and I used to do this thing that drove our mother nuts. If we were on a road trip somewhere and we were in the car, and you know how kids are in the car, you get bored, so you become obnoxious. And Mum learnt never to say, can you remind me of such and such a thing later on? Because my sister and I would grab hold of that and it would be, I would say to my sister, can you remind me to remind Mum of this later on? And she would go, okay, but can you remind me to remind you to remind Mum of this later on? And we would get going with that until Mum basically told us to shut up. And that is, you know, that's how my ADHD brain works. If I need to remind someone of something, I will fixate on that. Of course, as an adult, I'm not going to sit there and do that. But, you know, if my sister comes to my place and she leaves her jumper behind and I see it sitting on the end of the couch, you can guarantee I'm going to fixate on that until next time she comes around or until I go to her place. If I'm going to her place, I'm not going to forget it. I'm going to get it and I'm going to take it with me because things aren't right in the world because the jumper's been left there. If she comes around before I go to her place, I'm going to probably remind her about 3 or 4 times while she's there, don't forget your jumper. And then as she's leaving, I'm going to once again make sure she's got her jumper. So I don't buy any of this crap coming from Stephan's mouth. I mean, who does buy any of this crap coming from Stephan's mouth? It's not like having ADHD means you're all going to forget exactly the same things at exactly the same time. It just doesn't work that way.
And is she on medication for this stuff?
Normally, yes. She's been staying with her grandparents a lot this week while her mom was working. So she has not been getting her meds a whole lot.
Okay.
Now, it's interesting the way he words that. We've heard from Maddie's friends that she didn't like taking her meds. And we've heard from Maddie's friends that it's quite possible that she wasn't taking her meds for a few weeks, which would tie in with Jenn starting her new job. Both Jenn and Stephan really put it back on Yolanda. The way he said it there basically is essentially blaming Yolanda for not being a responsible grandparent and making sure that Maddie took her meds. I wouldn't be surprised if Yolanda simply acknowledged that Maddie was old enough to be responsible for her own medications. And if Maddie said, I don't want to take that medication that they give me at night because it makes me feel fuzzy, then Yolanda's probably gone, okay, you don't have to do that while you're here. Because when we see Yolanda, she certainly doesn't come across as the same sort of stoner that Jenn is. So I think she probably has different opinions on what are suitable medications for a 13-year-old child. And hydroxyzine is definitely not a suitable medication for a 13-year-old child. So I could imagine her being quite supportive of Maddie saying, I don't want to take this. But the way Jenn and Stephan put it they have this almost accusatory tone. You know, it's Yolanda's fault. She's just so irresponsible. Well, if I had to give parenting points in terms of choosing what medications Maddie was having, I would give all the points to Yolanda if in fact she was allowing Maddie to not have hydroxyzine.
So she was really spaced.
Where's Mom working at? What changed in her hours that she needs all this sleep?
She's training, so it's not a set schedule yet.
Okay.
It's just early this day, late closing training this
So
day.
different hours. Yeah, no, that takes a toll.
So I came up here. She needed help. I split my time between the two places.
Again, he's trying to once again insert himself more than what he is actually involved. I split my time between the two places. When you hear someone say that, that would make you think that they were spending equal amounts of time in the two places, not that they had been living with their parents again for the last 2-3 months and were going up occasionally for visits. But he doesn't want to say it that way because he wants to sound highly involved in Maddie's life. So for him, he splits his time between the two places. And again, I'm like everyone else. I don't understand this claim that he went up there because she needed help. For starters, if she did in fact need help in terms of getting Maddie to school and all that, she didn't need help until she went back to work on the Wednesday. Neither of them work, so it's not like he had to be there for the Monday. So, for some reason, it was important for him to be there on the Sunday night. But it doesn't fit with Jenn needed help. Because we know that Stephanie was happy enough to drop Maddie home with Jenn not there, meaning that clearly they didn't worry about Maddie being dropped off home without Jenn being around. She's got 2 flatmates. Maddie wouldn't be in the house on her own for long. And of course, she had her aunt just around the corner. Stephanie would have been like a 2-minute drive away. Given that the expectation was that Maddie would be dropped off home and begin getting herself ready for bed, which apparently was not anything that was of a concern, there's just no logical reason for him to be there on the Sunday night.
I needed a visit. We all needed to be a little happier together. So.
Okay, full disclosure, I have paid way less attention to Stephan's interviews than Jenn's interviews because I find him so triggering. So I hadn't caught the way he said this. We needed a visit. We all needed to be happy together. Or something along those lines. I don't know whether he said I needed a visit or we needed a visit. But either way, it's basically now saying that not so much about Jenn needing the help, but that, we needed to be all happy together. Like a little cult, shiny happy people. And that's probably not the correct phrase to use for that, but you know what I mean. He's now implying that everyone was miserable because they were separated and that they needed to reunite. Well, we know why Stephan felt he needed to be happy with Jenn and Maddie, and it's not a good form of happy. But it's definitely giving a different reason for him coming as opposed to him coming to help Jenn out. He's inferring here that he came because we all just needed a chance to catch up together again and be happy together. But if you came to help out because Jenn was going to be at work, how could you all be happy together if Jenn was at work? There's no logic in any of his stories.
This is a great thing. JYP. Just tell me.
And where's the McDonald's?
Right.
That doesn't make sense. Right? Because the school's up here?
Am I messing up the streets again?
They're so not buying his story. They see his story as being so insignificant that they're still focusing on his route. And this is totally wigging him out because they're not giving him the responses that he is expecting for his story. He's expecting them to be hanging on his every word and to be giving him the confirmation that he requires that they believe his story. But they're not giving him that, and you get these long stretches of silence, and then you get the two detectives having a conversation between themselves and excluding Stephan, and he hates that. He can't cope with that because he has to know that he's basically got them believing what he's saying. He has to know he's in control of the situation. And them basically having this conversation between them, which does not include him, shows him he's not in control of the situation whatsoever. What's he going to do? He's going to play the innocent victim here. He's going to insert himself back into the conversation. He wants a chance to revisit his story in a way that they will accept it. So he's like, have I got my streets wrong again? Well, you know you've got your streets wrong again because you're telling outright lies. They know you're telling outright lies, and you are just about to discover that.
Yeah, town. This one's town center, but town loop.
We're just trying to figure out your direction of travel, right?
I'm so sorry. I'm so bad with that area over there, Hunters Creek.
So I suspect that he was in panic mode about now, and the best he can offer is, I'm so bad with that area, Hunters Creek, and yet basically him and Jenn are saying that that's pretty much the only vape store that he will go to, which is a block or so from Maddie's school. He claims that he's taken Maddie to school 5 or 6 times. He claims that he uses the McDonald's as his reference for where to turn off at the school. Makes it sound like he is actually quite familiar with it. But because they're not buying his story, and he's realising now that they're not buying his story, he's panicking and he needs to try and fix it. So what does he do first? Claims that he doesn't know the area.
You said you made a U-turn at the church to go see if she wanted McDonald's again, correct?
Yes.
Did you go anywhere else? Because I know you said you had time to kill.
Yeah.
Did you guys go anywhere else?
No, we didn't go anywhere else.
Is there a reason why you would be back on John Young Parkway?
When we tried to go back to McDonald's a second time, we would have made a left over there instead and just looped around again.
What do you mean?
Just made a circle.
Made a circle house. Can you show me on the map?
So
this
going,
is the
going
McDonald's
back down
right here,
to the
right?
McDonald's.
That's the McDonald's right there.
Correct. So going back down and then just straight shot back down.
You would come down this way?
I can't read the map. I'm so sorry.
Yep, I'll go.
I can't remember. I'm so sorry. No, you can't figure out what they're asking you, can you? He's panicking because they've basically called his bluff. They've asked him if he went somewhere else, and he's like, no. Well, how come you were back on John Young Parkway going this direction? Oh, it's because we went back around and I tried to get her back to McDonald's. And I went in this loop. But even though I know that I went in this loop, I couldn't possibly tell you what that loop was. I've tried to make it up. You've questioned me. I've got it wrong. So suddenly now I can't remember. He is the worst liar on the planet. These guys have incredible patience. I would have been just nailing his ass to the wall about this point in time.
Where's the McDonald's?
The McDonald's is right here. This is Town Loop. So this is Jongyang Parkway. You guys are coming up
This is the
Jongyang.
McDonald's.
Yep.
And the school's on this corner.
Correct. Somewhere over here. So we come back out here, there, and then we can take a straight shot back down to the school again there. They connect. Town Loop and Town Center connect.
Right.
So now, after claiming that he doesn't know the area, after claiming that he doesn't know the streets, he's going to give these detectives a little geography lesson for Hunters Creek. See? These two connect. Like, are you really that dumb? That's what he's inferring here. He's like, well, of course, this is all so logical. He's basically attempting to gaslight them here. Quite surreptitiously, but he's attempting to gaslight them. Basically, I know the area better than you do. You clearly don't know the area if you need to question me on this. Which, of course, doesn't fit with his previous comment, oh, I don't know the area.
So where did you make the U-turn?
The U-turn was on the street when we were going to go back to McDonald's. And then we drove down to McDonald's here.
Right, so just...
He really must think these detectives are dumbass. So far, we've had him doing a U-turn on the street. He did a U-turn at the school. He did a U-turn, I think at one stage, didn't he say, at McDonald's? He did a U-turn in the church car park. And now he's back to doing a U-turn on the street. He should realise by now that none of his story is actually working. But he is so used to basically bluffing his parents, I believe, that he thinks that if he keeps asserting these things, they will believe him. Because we've seen how that works now in the jail phone calls. He can tell his parents anything and they just seem, or Deb at least, seems to believe him. Chris, it seems to hold his tongue until he's ready to really nail Stephan, and then he nails him. Deb, on the other hand, laps up everything Stephan says. So I don't think he is accustomed to having people like these detectives questioning him and not believing him.
So I don't get confused. You're going up Jongyang Parkway, right? You're going northbound.
Originally, yes.
Right. You make a left at the McDonald's.
Here, go towards the school.
Okay. How far did you get before you made the U-turn? So
we got... Is this the school right here?
Yep, that's Town Loop.
So we got up to here and then made a U-turn over here, past the median.
Okay. So...
And back to McDonald's.
On Lincoln Town Loop?
Still time to kill. She still didn't want the McDonald's, but I did give her a raspberry and cheese Danish.
So did you go through the drive-thru? Did you go inside?
No, didn't go inside.
Where did you get the Danish from?
Oh, the Antonins that I brought from home. I gave her a couple of those for them to go on.
Okay.
So she wasn't without food totally.
Now, I know they've got a job to do, so they can't sit there and play around. But it would have been fun to be one of those detectives and to just see how far you could make him stretch his story. See how many times he decides to go back to Macca's. And we finally get the Danish introduced. This Danish that magically appeared in his car because he brought it from home. Sure. This from a guy who, according to his parents, has to munch on things 24/7. So you're telling me that, does he mean he brought it from the townhouse? Because why would you do that if you were planning on going to Macca's? Or does he mean he brought it from Northport the day before and it just happened to still be sitting in his car? He made a 3-hour trip and left this Danish in his car while he was doing this 3-hour drive. Because that doesn't sound very believable either. So, I mean, we know the Danish never existed, obviously, because none of this never happened. But it's just ridiculous. He's introducing the Danish now to sound like a responsible parent. And I think it's just that he's panicking because he doesn't know what it is that they are trying to get out of him. So he's trying to basically cover all bases. Why are they still questioning me? Maybe they're questioning me over Maddie not having breakfast. So let's introduce a magic Danish that we will produce out of thin air so that we can say it's not like she went hungry because I gave her a Danish. The guy is utterly ridiculous.
So we just continued past it again and turned around and said, screw it, just drop you off early.
Okay, so you came back around to the McDonald's.
And then right onto the school road from there.
What's is that back on John Young Parkway?
Yeah,
or?
back on the John Young Parkway. It comes down here, and then here's Town Center again.
So then you took Town Center
Yes.
the second time around?
Yes, and then made a right down to the school.
You made a right down to the school, did you? So you dropped her off at the school? Because I thought you dropped her off down away from the school, some distance from the school, where you could see the overpass, but it doesn't sound like you could see the school. So he's getting himself all confused here because they've just got him in a spin because he knows that he's basically been caught out in his lies. And he's trying to fix his lies, but in fixing his lies, he's just making himself look so much worse.
Do you remember what time you dropped her off?
I estimated it to be sometime between 8:20, 8:40.
Are you on your phone? Do you have Google Maps?
I do, but I wasn't mapsing it.
Do you guys actually say that in America? Mapsing with the S in the middle? I wasn't mapsing it. I would normally say, I wouldn't even say I wasn't mapping it. I would say I wasn't using Google Maps at the time, or I was not using a GPS or something, but I wouldn't say I wasn't mapsing it. And yeah, I know, you guys probably think that there are some odd things that I say, so feel free to come at me for that, but it just sounds so odd.
When you're giving her rides, does she sit in the front or the back?
She sits in the front. She likes to sit in the front.
Do you mind if I look at your maps real quick?
Yeah, it's fine.
Thanks.
And just to confirm, also, you said, so the second time around, you said you went up John Young Parkway, you went through Town Center this time, made a right on Town Loop, and then you said you dropped her off.
It was right here in this stretch here. Yeah.
Around this area, okay. Which was before the underpass?
Correct, before the underpass, just before the church. The church was ahead on the left, the underpass was just beyond that, and the school was just on the other side of the underpass. So maybe,
on the left-hand side.
Maybe a block away.
Okay.
He sounds so very confident there, like he thinks he's figured out what they're asking of him. And he thinks he's finally come up with the right answer to their questions.
And you said that that's typical of her to walk that distance?
Yeah, she likes the morning walks when it's cool. She doesn't like being seen getting out of certain cars. Being a middle schooler, it's an image thing. And she will sometimes like to hang out and wait for her friends. She's known to do that.
Okay.
He's actually showing just how very ignorant he is here, isn't he? saying that she likes to hang out and wait for her friends, because we know it doesn't work that way. She never hangs out anywhere before school to wait for her friends. She gets dropped off at the school, and her friends meet her when she gets dropped off at the school. Because clearly she gets dropped off normally after their buses have arrived. Let's not forget, Maddie's out of area. She doesn't travel to school by bus, whereas it appears that most of her friends travel by bus. So there's nothing to be achieved for her in getting to school early. And like I've said in previous things, this is a child with severe anxiety issues. Do you really think she wants to hang around somewhere on her own without her friends being there? Not a snowball's chance in hell.
Do you mind if I just take a picture of your history?
Yeah, that's fine.
And that time would have been, you said, around
8:20ish, 8:30, sometime between 8:20 and 8:40.
What time does she go into class?
She has to be there no later than 9:15. Doors open at 8. Doors open at 9, I think. And then school officially starts around 9:20 or 9:28, I think.
Okay.
So that up.
And when you dropped her off, is that earlier than typical, later than typical, around the same time?
Earlier than typical.
Really?
We had made really good time that morning, and with the subtraction of McDonald's, we had more time than usual.
Okay.
Yes, but, given that instead of going to McDonald's, you did the guided tour of Hunter's Creek, you didn't really have more time than usual. So please explain why you still dropped her off even before the school was open. Because I would imagine, once again, a child who struggles with anxiety is not going to want to be dropped off just randomly in the neighbourhood, a short drive from the school, when the school's not even open. Where's the safety in that? It's such a poor story, and yet he seems to think it's credible. He always has these ridiculous stories that in his mind are supposedly credible.
She said it was okay. She was very confident, convincing that it would be fine.
And you saw what direction she walked to after you dropped her off?
Yeah, it looked like she was moving towards the direction of the school like she was supposed to.
Was she still on the right side of the road, or did she cross over?
She was when I left her, yeah. She was still on the right side.
What kind of phone is this?
S23 Ultra, I think.
I don't know how to work this thing.
So I barely know how to work it myself.
I'm an iPhone person.
No.
I barely know how to work it myself. Translation being, don't ask me for help because I don't want to actually incriminate you myself by showing you things that are probably still hidden on there.
Is it okay if I go in your settings real quick? I just want to see if you're logged on to your Google.
I am not logged on to my Google with that, actually.
Is it okay if I check?
Yeah.
Does she have any other devices besides that phone? Any other electronics?
She had her school laptop with her.
Okay. Is that still supposed to be with her?
Still supposed to be with her, yes.
Okay. And what kind of book bag was she carrying?
Black book bag with like grayish blue hibiscus flowers on it, like a print.
Now, we do get stinky size as well as the Soto size. I think in this instance, the stinky sigh actually is him actually letting off a bit of stress. Suddenly they're asking questions that he can answer. Things that he doesn't have to make up. because he knows what her book bag looks like. He knows that her laptop was in the book bag, because of course he was the last person to have them. So he knows exactly what the book bag looks like and exactly what was in the book bag before he dumped it into the dumpster.
When she leaves in the mornings, what does she usually put her phone?
Either in her backpack or like her back pocket, kind of wherever she just thinks to put it at the time.
Hold on, I don't know how to use this phone.
I suspect that, given it's part of her job, that Ms. Tagler, or Detective Tagler we should probably call her, actually does know how to use an Android phone, even if her own phone is a iPhone. Because clearly she's been doing her job for a while. You can tell how skilled she is. So she's been at that job for a while. So to me, that says that she has discovered those images in Stephan's Google account and is actually signalling to the other detective, you need to look at this. Because, like I said, this is an extremely experienced detective. She certainly doesn't come across as being even remotely incompetent. So I would put my money on, at this particular moment in time, she's just seen those images and she wants to make sure the other detective is on board in terms of how the questioning goes.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
I don't know, you've probably been asked already, but she's never ran away or been away for longer than a certain period of time, amount of time, nothing like that.
No, she's very dependent on us. I don't think she'd know what to do if she did run away. She's not the type. She's a good kid.
Notice the change in direction of the questioning immediately after Detective Tagler hands him the phone. I do think that this probably was the point in time when they suddenly discovered exactly what it was they were looking at with this guy.
Besides the ADHD issue diagnosis or anything else?
Yeah, she was tested a while back and had some symptoms of autism, so she's potentially on the spectrum there.
Okay.
She was officially diagnosed with it when she was younger, and then she was retested and said, well, she shows symptoms of being on the spectrum, but maybe not full-on autistic.
It is such a shame that she didn't end up with the right mental health professional who could actually pick up on the fact that, hang on, this child may actually be suffering from complex PTSD. Yes, a child's symptoms of ADHD or ASD can increase as they go through puberty because of the hormonal differences. But if there was a marked change in her symptoms that did not coincide with the onset of puberty, then someone should have been asking questions. Now, we don't know when this supposed ASD diagnosis connection may have been made, but certainly, unless it is around the time of puberty, a drastic change in a child's ASD or ADHD symptoms should be questioned.
Is this what you use to go places?
Yes. places, search addresses, look at store hours, write reviews. It's a pretty new phone though.
Again, he's able to pick up on the fact that they're not buying his soggy bread. But he doesn't know how to respond to it. So instead of actually at that point in time going, oh, by the way, I accidentally did a factory reset on it, apparently he's hoping they're not going to notice that by the looks of it. Instead, he comes out with, it's a pretty new phone though, because that's going to excuse everything. It's a new phone. Well, I don't know about you, but when I get a new phone, I like to explore and see what's different. Obviously, with iPhones, there's not a huge difference, but there usually are a few different things because it will automatically be on the newest iOS. This guy has, or claims that he has ADHD. I actually don't believe that he does. He claims that he has ADHD. If you have ADHD and you get a new phone, you're going to spend hours playing around with that phone until you know it inside out and back to front. And I think we can actually presume that that is exactly what Stephan would do, because we've even heard his parents talk about how he has to be an expert on things.
Have we had any updates?
We literally have like 50 people right now on scene looking. I don't know if there's any updates. The best person would be the other detective because he's the one that is in charge of all this.
Actually, Stephan, you just gave them the most important update of the entire case by handing over your phone.
I don't think I've eaten anything since yesterday.
Things aren't going his way right now. The detectives aren't buying his story. They're not even giving him 100% of their attention, and he doesn't like that. So what does he do? I don't think I've eaten anything since yesterday. Let's put it back on Stephan. Please give me sympathy. I'm going to use this because I think things are going really badly in this interview, and I need to figure out how to get my ass out of this in a way that doesn't make me look bad. So I can see that you are not happy with the answers I gave you. So I've been sitting here in the silence, in that awkward silence, which I feel the need to feel, and the best excuse I can come up with is that my blood sugar levels are so low because I haven't eaten anything since yesterday. Poor little Steffi Weffy. Of course, the problem that he's going to discover is that these people are not like his parents. They've got a job to do, and they're not going to play the game.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys are worried.
When did you come back to help hurting?
Yeah. What do you mean?
Like, because you live down south, right? Mm-hmm. When did you come back up north to help her?
I just got here this weekend.
Do you remember what day it was?
Sunday was her birthday party, so yeah, it was the evening after her birthday party, Sunday.
Okay. Do you remember what time you got here on Sunday?
8:30ish maybe.
Okay.
Just in time to make sure that she was doing all her nighttime routines. I'm waiting for her mom to get home.
Again, none of this time blindness, because we know from all the data that that's exactly when he turned up. It was around 8:45. So, no time blindness. And also, I think here, he's trying to fill in the silences a little bit now. When he says, just in time to make sure she was doing all her nighttime routine. He doesn't like these silences, because that's not what he's accustomed to by the sounds of it. He is used to his parents jumping and basically accepting everything he tells them. Or at least Deb. Don't know what the story is there with Chris. But I think he's probably a little bit relieved that at this point in time they've eased off on the questions about his travel, like his route for supposedly taking Maddie to school. And these are questions he can answer. But because they still have the silence, that's making him uncomfortable. So he now has to fill that silence.
You live in North Pole, right?
Yeah, I split my time between the two.
Is that on
places.
Snug Street?
Snug Street,
Okay,
yeah.
that makes sense. You have a lot of Snug Street on here.
Yeah, I split my time between the two.
Is that Broward County or?
Sarasota County, I believe,
okay.
or Charlotte County, either way.
Gotcha.
It's my parents' house. They're old and they need help these days. And they got a house full of poodles, and it's chaos. So
Oh, they're old and they need help. Yeah, BS, Stephan, as if you would ever lift a finger to help your parents. Sounds like you sleep all day and your parents have to tiptoe around in their house while you are asleep in case they wake you up. And after us hearing him in these jail calls, going on about how he wants to be there with the puppies, now he's talking about this house full of poodles that's all chaos, which basically is trying to shine a negative light on the fact that they've got these poodles. He doesn't sound overly in love with the poodles in this interview.
I needed to come back up here and just get away from that. Between two deaf old people yelling at each other and poodles yapping all the time, it's enough to drive anyone up a wall.
Geez, I hope his parents got to hear him say that. Basically, two deaf old people yelling at each other in a house full of poodles, and it was driving him up the wall. Well, we know that they're still clearly handing over all this money for him to buy his lollies and his coffee and everything. But I would love to know what they think of these comments that he's made about them. Or are they just going to ignore them and forgive them?
Just very happy to be back here.
Did you and your wife, when you guys were looking for where did you guys look?
Me and her stayed local. It was all the rest of the family that mobilized and was beating the bushes. And
I have no idea why she would call Jenn his wife at that point in time. I would have thought that she would know that Jenn is definitely not his wife. And basically, with him saying that he's splitting his time between the two houses, well, why would you then expect that they were a married couple? So I hope this was some sort of strategy and not some deficit on her part. Now, something I've noticed throughout this interview, which is really interesting. Have you noticed it's a bit like Jenn with Maddie? he always refers to Jenn as her. I don't think I've heard him using her name. There's been very few redactions here. I think the only redactions, there might have been once where I think Maddie's name might have been used, but I've not heard him refer to Jenn as Jenn. She's always her. Does that show us what his actual opinion of Jenn is? Does he have a somewhat low opinion of Jenn?
Did you guys drive together or separate?
I don't think we drove anywhere when we were looking.
You didn't drive anywhere?
Not that I recall.
Did you guys go anywhere last night?
She's actually working very hard here to get him to make some actual admissions, and he's not doing so. So she's basically asked him if they've been anywhere searching, knowing full well what the story is there. She's only recently done... No, she didn't interview Jenn till after this. But even still, they know that he was out that night. But they're asking him, where did you guys go? And he's like, I don't recall if we went out searching anywhere. Or no, you didn't go anywhere together, and it would be something that you could easily answer. No, we went home after we left Yolanda's. We got high as kites. And then by the time we finally woke up, Detective Hunt was here to interview us. And who knows what else they did during the day after Detective Hunt left at lunchtime. There's about 7 hours of that day that we don't know what they were doing. Probably just sitting around the apartment doing God knows what, and probably went back to bed, given the fact that he was out all night or for several hours of the night. So I would imagine that he woke up to talk to Detective Hunt, probably went back to bed, and maybe he is correct in saying that he hasn't eaten all day because he's probably slept all day. But he knows that him and Jenn didn't go anywhere to search anywhere. But he's being vague about it. Probably because he doesn't want to actually bring up the fact that he was out driving around at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Was that media?
Maybe. I think Fox 35 or something was coming.
Yeah, if it is, let me tell him he needs to take it out.
Okay.
I don't recall. You have to ask her if we went anywhere. I don't recall. I was so zonked out on Ativan at that point.
Okay.
I was a wreck. I don't think...
And this would have been when?
I don't recall us going anywhere last night, but...
You have to ask her, because I don't know what answer I should be giving here, and I don't know if we've agreed on an answer for this. So I don't want to give the wrong answer here, so I'm not going to give you any answer. Basically, he's doing his damnedest to avoid the fact that he had gone out in the middle of the night. But it seems like him and Jenn hadn't communicated over what the story was going to be with that. Or he's forgotten what they arranged in terms of that side of the story. So he's directing them back to Jenn.
Honestly, at that point my brain was mush and I was on so many tranquilizers to keep me stable. I was just...
You said Ativan?
Yeah.
Do you usually take that, or?
Yeah, I have a prescription. I haven't needed it in a long time, though. But
What's that for?
anxiety.
Okay.
I was having these rolling panic attacks and breaking down crying, and I just...
Oh, it got lost, sorry.
Thank you. Here you go.
And when was that, Stephan? Because, well, when you did the interview the night before that, you were just so stoned You certainly weren't having rolling panic attacks and breaking down and crying. And the interview you did earlier in the day, you also weren't breaking down, crying. And it sounds like you've slept for the rest of the day. He's basically, once again, he's doing everything in his power to try and create the sympathy connection. Poor me, I'm a victim, feel sorry for me, don't ask me the hard questions because I'm just so traumatised by this, and you're going to traumatise me more by asking me these questions. It's interesting that he's claiming that he has these anxiety medications, because we know that he didn't have them when he was down at Northport before he left, or on the Saturday, because he claimed that he needed them. He apparently asked his parents for them and claimed that he found ones that were 4 years old or something like that. Now, if you ask someone who does regularly take them, how are you going to have ones that are 4 years old? If you regularly take them, you would have used those ones up a long time ago. Given that he'd been living down with his parents for 2 to 3 months by that stage, any anxiety medication that was there would have been used up before getting a new script. So we can be pretty certain here that these claims are complete, utter BS.
Only way I could get to sleep last night. And then again this afternoon. That's why I missed your calls. I'm sorry. So if you took an Ativan and conked out for a few hours.
I highly doubt that he needed anything to help him conk out for a few hours in the afternoon before this interview. We know that he didn't take anything to help him sleep the night before this because he was out driving around. So that's definitely a lie. And given that he was out half the night driving around, pretty certain that he would have just conked out immediately after the interview with Detective Hunt. So, yeah, I ain't buying it, dude.
It's the only time when I'm not crying.
You know, telling detectives 3/4 of the way through an interview, when you've been quite level in the way you've been talking, you've not shown any emotion, that the only time you're not crying is when you're asleep, do you really think they're going to buy that? Sure, we've seen firsthand that your parents buy it every time when you talk about all these horrible things that you're going through. Your face is so sunken and you don't sleep and you've lost so much weight. But these detectives are a little bit more on point than your parents. They can see you. They're having a conversation with you. And they can see that you are currently not crying. So claiming that the only time you're not crying is when you're asleep is a really dumb-ass move.
And I remember Catherine was actually quite surprised when I said,
It's okay if I just pop down real quick. Yeah.
So we're trying to get just a good idea, times, all that stuff.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. I'm giving my best recollections. I'm not a morning person as it is.
Again, he's realised they don't believe his story. So what has he come out with? I'm sorry, I'm giving my best recollection, and now we're adding into it. I'm not a morning person as it is. So I don't remember really clearly that morning because I'm not a morning person, even though that was supposedly the last time I ever saw Maddie. And even though I can give pretty damn accurate times when I'm telling the truth.
So a lot of the times are best guess.
But we know that you go up Jongyang Parkway, down. That's the
Yes.
the road you usually take
Yeah.
to take her, and then you make a left at that McDonald's, right, which is the
Yeah.
town loop.
You can make a left to get there either at the McDonald's or at Town Center itself. They both lead to the school.
So if you leave her at, just so you get a sense of direction, Jongyang Parkway goes northbound and southbound. So you're going northbound into Orange County, making a left at the McDonald's, which is the town loop. You said when you did drop her off at that medium, you said it was around 8:20 to 8:30ish, somewhere around that time.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Okay.
It was early, but not like outrageously early, you know.
So what would you estimate when you made a left at that McDonald's to be?
After I dropped her off,
No, I'm saying when you dropped her off.
first left by that McDonald's.
Yeah, when you first go, that first left that you make at the McDonald's.
It had to have been around maybe eight, maybe quarter after 8, sometime in there.
Okay.
Sometime between 8 and a quarter after, I think.
All right. So just so it's, you can kind of picture it here on the map. So you're going northbound. You make a left here.
I love how skillfully this detective is just reeling him in, and he's about to nail him for all his lies.
Around like 8:10, 8:15. Let's say 8:15, around there. When you get over here, you make a U-turn, you go back to the McDonald's. But you said that she still doesn't want the McDonald's.
Still doesn't want it. She was just going to eat the danishes that I had given her.
Wow, that really is a magical Danish. Because now it's gone from being one Danish to multiple Danishes. She was just going to eat the Danishes that I gave her. He's really, really not good at maintaining his lies, is he? I can't believe that his parents buy all his BS. Because we are seeing firsthand the way he spins his stories. And he can't keep his stories straight. And yet Deb at least, laps it all up.
So you're going up here now, still northbound on Jongyang Parkway. You make a left at Town Center this time.
Town Center, then make,
Then
a,
make a
right
right.
onto, yes.
And
the
then you
school
drop
road.
her off
And
around
then
like
dropped her off around halfway up the road there.
So keep in mind, all of this is still northbound,
Okay.
right? You're still northbound on Jongyang Parkway.
Northbound.
So why is your car seen going southbound at 8:10? I'll show you what location it is. McDonald's is over here. At 8:10, your car is seen going southbound at this intersection. So meaning going toward Kissimmee.
Oh snap. I love that part of the interview. Of all the recorded interviews, that has got to be my favourite part. He completely nailed his ass to the wall there.
I had forgotten something. I had forgotten my gate clicker. I'm sorry. I forgot. I had gone back to the house real quick after we left. Because I had forgotten my gate clicker.
And we're supposed to believe that this guy has a genius IQ. The detective has basically said, we got you on camera travelling this route. Now, if you were smart enough, you would realise, well, if they've got me on camera travelling this route, they've probably got a lot more intel than just this one particular instance of me on camera travelling this route. Maybe I shouldn't lie and say I forgot my gate clicker, because they're probably going to interview the security guard that I interacted with, who will tell them that I actually had my gate clicker. But no, he doesn't even figure that out. He honestly has to be the dumbest criminal on the planet. But I noticed he said I'd forgotten he was going to say he forgot something. Wasn't going to say what it was he forgot, but he stopped himself. He obviously didn't want them to ask what he'd forgotten. I wonder, like I said, if he realised he'd forgotten one of the Crocs, or if the something was he needed to go upstairs and retrieve a firearm. But he stopped himself from saying I had forgotten something and goes, I'm sorry, I'd forgotten my gate clicker. Well, that's BS, Stephan. And I can't remember when they interviewed the guard, but why would you lie when they've already told you that they've checked your route? They know your route, they have it on camera. So logically, if they've checked your route, they're going to check with the guard. He should realise at this point in time that his goose is well and truly cooked and start actually coming clean. But because he's had a lifetime of lying to his parents and getting away with it, and we've heard him continue to do so in the jail calls, he thinks he can do this.
I actually had to go through the front gate and use my parking pass to grab my clicker. So it was the wrong time. I'm sorry. Like I said, I was guesstimating these times. I'm not a morning person.
Okay.
So yes, we'd gone out.
How far did you get before you came back down? When you realized you forgot your clicker?
Nearly all the way to the school.
This has got to be, by far, his dumbest lie throughout the entire thing. You got nearly to the school with Maddie in the car, and then you realised you forgot your gate clicker. So you couldn't get in the gate without the gate clicker. So you returned to the townhouse via the front gate, got let in by the guard because you didn't have your clicker, retrieved your clicker, and then went and took Maddie to school. It is honestly the most insanely ridiculous story that anyone could come up with. He's jumped on the idea of the gate clicker because whatever it was he went back for, he clearly couldn't tell them what it was, which to me definitely says it had something to do with what he was in the middle of doing. So either he panicked because there was already traffic out and about and he realised that he had a deceased child in his car, and maybe he did panic and go back for his firearm. Or maybe, and it doesn't seem quite so likely because it's hard to see in the footwell area of the passenger side, but maybe he went back for a Croc? Who knows? Maybe, I don't think he would have needed to have gone back to get, if he'd forgotten to put Crocs on Maddie, which he clearly did, given that he was planning on taking her somewhere and leaving her somewhere, I don't think it would have been a concern in his head to get shoes. Given that he disposed of one of the Crocs, if it was a concern, and he did that before he took Maddie out to St Cloud, meaning that if he was worried about the fact that Maddie had nothing on her feet, he could have gone and retrieved something else from the townhouse during the period of time when Jenn was at her appointment and he was home alone. So it wasn't a concern for him. So I think, kudos, I can't remember who it was that said it, but I think that the person who suggested that maybe he went back for the firearm, I think you could well be correct on that matter, because it seems to be the most logical answer. Other than the other possibility that I have considered is that he may have gone back to get the dog lead to secure Maddie. Although we do know that the seat was reclined at some point. So was it that there was something that made him decide he needed to recline Maddie's seat because maybe she wasn't staying in position? And the only place he could think of to do that would be to head back to the apartments. But then wouldn't you be worried about other residents at that time of day? So I'm not sure that he would have gone back there to recline the seat. Which goes back to either getting a dog lead to secure Maddie or getting a firearm. I have speculated that perhaps he did overdose Maddie with whatever he gave her, and I'm sure that will come out in the trial. And that perhaps the broken hyoid bone is a result of him strapping her into the vehicle. But I'm not sure that that would, in fact, cause enough pressure to do that. I'm certainly not up there with all that sort of biology side of things, but I would imagine it would take far more pressure to break a hyoid bone than strapping them into a car. Anyway, enough of that speculation. Let's get on with this.
And then we turned around. We had plenty of time to kill.
And once again, we hear him talking about having plenty of time to kill, which I find so triggering, especially because we hear it from him, Jenn, and Chris. Which, once again takes me back to the question of how much did Chris actually know?
So it was time to go back. I rushed back, got the clicker, and that's when I came back here this way.
So you guys came back here to get your clicker?
Correct.
So when we look at the cameras in the front, it's going to show you coming back in
Correct.
here with her in the car?
Yes, with her in the passenger seat,
Okay.
yes.
I know it sounds like we're asking you stupid questions, okay? We just want to verify
okay.
the times.
I'm sorry I'm not being more help. I'm not a morning person. I was half asleep as it was.
So again, we have, I'm sorry I'm not much help, and now we're going to throw in, I was half asleep. I'm not a morning person as it was. Well, if you are half asleep, you probably shouldn't have been driving.
Trying.
The clickers to get where?
Into our neighborhood.
Okay, and you forgot the clicker where?
I had forgotten the clicker here.
So how did you get in?
I was able to use my parking sticker for them to scan to let me through.
Did he actually believe that they wouldn't go and interview the security guard now that he's basically included another person in his story?
Okay, so could you not have done that after you dropped her off?
I could have, but I also like to come back in from the back gate a lot of the times, and I didn't know if I would be back right away. And sometimes they're busy up front, so.
Every time he says that, I try really hard to find the logic in what he's saying. But there's just absolutely no logic. You like to come back in through the back gate. So so that you could come back in through the back gate, you came back to collect the gate clicker and went in through the front gate so that you could therefore return through the back gate. Well, couldn't you have just done exactly what you did, or what you claim you did, let's say, when you returned, and just accepted that this time round you can't go in through the back gate?
It's better not to wait in a line.
What time is security usually there at the front gate?
They were there when I came through. He scanned my ticket.
So would it have not just made more sense to drop her off and come back since security's already there?
I don't know if it made more sense. It's just what I did.
Okay.
So tell me again, Deb Sterns, what's your son's IQ? I seem to be struggling a bit to believe this notion that he has a genius IQ. Because what person ever is going to say that they don't know if it makes more sense to have just come back and done that after dropping Maddie off? I mean, essentially, he has said that he got all the way to the school, and then rather than dropping Maddie off, he turned around and went back to the townhouse. And having already established that it was perfectly acceptable in his mind to drop Maddie off at around 8:20, the fact that he's turned around and come back to the townhouse, meaning that he was back at the townhouse 10 minutes after he would have supposedly dropped Maddie off. Essentially what I'm saying here is, why not just drop Maddie off and you would have been back at the townhouse pretty much at the same time, or 10 minutes later?
Here you go. Oh, thank you.
Anything else that we haven't asked that you feel is important? Maybe that might help us out?
I'm sorry I'm having trouble recollecting everything.
I'm going to step away for a second.
So you over-explain everything and then you claim you're having trouble remembering everything. No, you just don't want to answer any more questions because basically you realise that they have got you up against a wall and there's no escape. You have basically put yourself in that corner there. Genius boy.
Anything that you remember maybe she might have told you?
She didn't mention anything in particular. I made a joke about her Crocs. She wears Crocs and socks.
It totally does my head in that he brought up Maddie's Crocs. That, I teased her about wearing Crocs with socks. Now, I think one of two things is happening here. Either he knows that if they find Maddie, they're going to find Maddie wearing socks and no shoes, because he screwed up there. He threw out one Croc and he hasn't found the other Croc. And I suspect what he's trying to achieve here is to give the impression that Maddie was so upset at being teased over wearing Crocs with socks that she would much rather go to school in just socks, and she threw away her Crocs. Which is one of those super unlikely, ridiculous Stephan Sterns stories that no other person with an IQ above 70 would consider coming up with. And I wonder if maybe this is because he realises that they are asking some really difficult questions here, and he wants to separate himself from his big mistake. Was he planning, after this interview with the police, to go in and find the other Croc that he didn't throw out and get rid of it after everyone was gone. Of course, the problem for him was that they weren't allowed back into the apartment. Presumably, that other croc ended up in evidence, but when forensics went through the apartment, they found that single croc. So, sucks to be him if that's what he was thinking, trying to establish this notion of she was so distraught over him teasing her over her crocs that she got rid of them, and that's why they found her with no crocs. Because don't forget, they did actually, in the description of what she was wearing, said she was wearing crocs. So obviously there needs to be some sort of plausible explanation as to why she was no longer wearing crocs. Of course, the problem with that also is that her socks were clean. She hadn't walked anywhere in her socks. So that's one explanation I can think of in terms of him bringing up the crocs with socks. The other one that comes to mind is that he hasn't actually made the connection in his head with what he's saying. They're nailing him on some pretty specific things here. And he's had a few moments through this interrogation, or this interview, where he's ended up having a bit of a panic because they've nailed him. You said you did this, well, how come we have you on camera here? And he's had to do some quick thinking and has come up with even less credible stories. So maybe in the back of his mind, without even realising that that's what's going on, this is a bit of a guilty slip. His brain has thrown up the thought of the crocs into his head without him stopping to think about the fact, well, hang on, I threw out one croc and I still don't know where the other one is. And this joke just comes out of nowhere and he probably realises after he's said it. Either way, I think there's definitely a bit of guilty leakage going on. Whether it's intentional or not, that's the question I have.
So we were joking about that.
Would you say she's usually like a happy, go lucky girl?
Very happy. She brings a lot of joy. She's a very good girl. It definitely doesn't feel the same around here if she's not here. She was so happy too.
Ding, ding, ding. She was so happy too. He's really, really screwing himself, isn't he?
She was looking forward to my visit here. She was looking forward to us all being together. She was just happy. She was just very happy.
Oh, wow.
I loved her like she was my own.
First of all, how dare he even say that? But once again, he's completely slipped into past tense now. He loved her like she was his own. Not he loves her like she's his own, but he loved her like she was his own. And you have to know that these detectives are trained to pick up on that sort of thing. So, straight away, I mean, they've, like I said, Detective Tagler, when she took his phone, probably saw those images. That's probably why she did the I don't know how to work these and handed it over to the other detective. Because they don't want to tell him what they know, obviously, at this point in time, because they want to question him and see what he's going to say. So they will have picked up on these past statements rather than talking about her in the present.
And is she the only child, or does she have siblings?
She is the only child, yes.
Do you have any kids with anyone else, or
No.
So she's kind of
is what we call me.
So you'd say you guys have a pretty good relationship.
Yeah, definitely have a very strong bond.
Just
But
dating.
I'm the person she goes to when her mom gets in a fight with her and she needs someone to comfort her, and like I'm that person for her.
And I'm willing to bet that he never did anything to actually smooth things over between the two of them. In fact, in a relationship like that, he probably would have been the one to turn around and intentionally do things that would basically set things off. So it was convenient for him, for Jenn and Maddie to be at each other's throats, because it got him right where he wanted to be with Maddie. It's not about them having a close relationship. It's about him being able to manipulate the relationships so that basically Maddie thought he was the go-to when her and Jenn were having an argument. And it does make me wonder. I have two theories about the Sunday night. One is that Jenn didn't see Maddie at all, and I've spoken about that several times. My other theory is that Jenn got home, Maddie had an argument with her because Maddie was upset about her birthday. She was really pissed, especially over the fact that Jenn didn't go. And Stephan did the, "Oh, come to me and come and sleep upstairs with me" type routine. But Jenn doesn't want to admit that she had a fight with Maddie. I believe it is definitely one of those two things. If Jenn didn't see Maddie on the Sunday night, my belief is that it is because Maddie was probably already knocked out on whatever drugs Stephan gave her.
How's her relationship with Mom?
Good most of the time. You know, puberty not long ago, so she's getting the PMS mood swings, and when her mom gets them too, you know, they butt heads, and so as well as you can expect. But otherwise, very loving. Very loving. Yeah. This girl knows nothing but love here in this house.
Part of me just wants to edit that part out and not play it because it makes me so furious. She knows nothing but love in this house. Neither you or Jenn showed this poor girl any love. Your idea of love, that's not love. That's an aberration. It should have never happened. This poor girl should have been living with her grandmother or living with her father. She should not have been in this household.
Hardly ever hears the word no. Double-edged sword that is.
Does anyone think that that he's actually parroting something that's been said by his parents on multiple occasions? Never hears the word no. Double-edged sword that is. Because that 100% describes his relationship with his parents. We hear how enabled he was, even as a young child and as a teenager. It sounds like... Okay, yeah, the pup's off again. It sounds like, based on everything that his friends have said, that if he wanted something, Deb bought it for him. Sounds like there was also that emotional abuse that occurred, which is probably the reason that she bought things for him. So, yes, definitely, it would have been a double-edged sword for his parents, the fact that they never told him no. And look where it got them.
How's she in school?
So-so. She's so-so in school.
Like grade-wise
she's
or
doing a
behavior-wise?
lot better, though. Apparently, she just made Student of the Week.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so we're very proud of her. She's doing singing, choir, and she's sounding just amazing. She sang for me last night, and I immediately wanted to show her the movie Sister Act because of the choir singing. It was so pretty. It reminded me. Told her I was very proud of her.
Does she have, does she like video games, anything like that?
She does like video games, yeah. She plays Roblox, Minecraft. I think those are the two big ones that I know of.
You don't know if her to like ever have any friends on there that she talks to, anything
She
like that?
does. She does group chats. She does like voice chatting too on it. Usually with like her cousins or her friends, and they'll all be playing Roblox or something, and, you know, yelling at each other on the phone.
Sorry, the pup is in crazy mode right now. He wants someone to play with him, and I have gone way over in terms of work with this tonight. So he's pestering the other chihuahua instead. Going back to Stephan and talking about Maddie playing these games with her friends and cousins and stuff like that, I bet this was something that was a major, major piss off for him. Because he would have wanted to have Maddie's attention 100% of the time. So he probably really, really resented when she was playing these games with her cousins or friends or whatever. Note that he didn't think to suggest the possibility of her conversing with strangers online, which, you know, seems to be the go-to with a lot of people when kids go missing. Were they conversing with someone online? But he's missed that cue, and he's just pointing out that, you know, it's this communication between family and friends, essentially. Because this is something that's important to him, because like I said, when that occurs, he doesn't get attention. So for him, that's the first thing that comes to mind, because it is so significant. And maybe he thought afterwards, oh, that could have been a good opening. But because it is so significant for him, he missed his opportunity to suggest that maybe she was communicating with a stranger online. You know what's really disturbing about that, though, is that some of the later information that came out about this Italo Brett, the music teacher, was they believed that he was also communicating with some of his students via Roblox. So it is quite possible that he could have been communicating with Maddie online. Can you imagine if they went down the wrong path and completely missed Stephan because they discovered this other predator? Thankfully that didn't happen, and thankfully by that stage they already had so much evidence against Stephan. But it's just an interesting thought.
When's the last time you all lived together?
December.
Okay.
December.
And you said the reason was for your parents down there?
Yeah, going down to help them because they're getting on in age and they're making their end-of-life plans and they need someone to help out.
Can you unlock this one more time, please?
Sure.
Yeah, right, Stephan. They seem to have done just fine for themselves over the past 12 months. So this BS story about needing to help out your poor old frail parents? Sure. Let's not forget also that approximately 5 hours after this interview, Chris Sterns hopped in his car at midnight and made a 3-hour drive to Orlando to help his son out. Doesn't sound very frail, does he? Especially not when he supposedly got up the next morning at 6:30 and headed out to the office at 7:30. Sounds like he's actually doing better than his son.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry, are you guys done?
No, we're good.
The other detective mentioned that you did not have your phone yesterday.
Correct.
Tell me about that.
I left my phone at home in the morning too. I was so busy riding herd over to get us out the door on time that I left my phone. She left her phone. We
Okay.
both left our phones.
Did you have your phone when you went to the smoke shop?
Not the first time after I dropped her off. I was still without it. I got my phone and went back to the smoke shop
Okay.
later when I got home.
And then I also noticed, I was checking your call history. I noticed that you don't have anything before this morning. Is that unusual on your phone?
No, it's a new phone. Stupid. I went to do an update yesterday morning, and I don't know what the fuck. Pardon me. I don't know what the heck I did, but somehow during the massive OS update, I managed to factory reset my phone and lose all of my contacts, all my information.
What time was that? Do you remember?
Oh, sometime while I was hanging out with her, I looked at her and said, "What did I just do?"
I have no idea why they redacted Jen's name there. Because we all know he's talking about Jenn. We've heard her version of the story as well. But does he really think these detectives are that dense? They've already proven to him that they don't believe his BS stories. And now he's claiming not only did he happen to leave his phone at home in the morning, but oh my gosh, you know what? And then when I was hanging out with Jenn, I accidentally did a factory reset on it because I don't have a genius IQ. I'm so stupid that I don't know what I did, but whatever I did resulted in my phone being factory reset. I mean, it says a lot about his parents if he thinks that these kinds of stories are going to be believed.
Okay.
She might know better. I don't know what time it was. It was when I was here with.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions. Do you, Louis?
I don't know where my head was yesterday. It was so far up my backside.
That's okay, we understand.
That is such a disgusting turn of phrase, I have to say. And I love that she's already switched off to him by this point. Because she knows, she knows that this is BS. Him claiming that he doesn't know where his head was. She understands, but she doesn't understand this whole your brain was muddled. She understands that you are lying to them and trying to get out of a serious crime.
In the meantime, while we're waiting for all this to get sorted out, I am going to hold on to your phone, okay? I'll give it back to you when we're done. Okay? Do you have any questions for us?
How long are you gonna need my phone?
I'm not sure. I'm waiting for my supervisor to call me.
My dad. It's just my dad's using that to get a hold of me and get updates.
They can call Jen's phone.
Okay.
Again, super lame-o excuse. He must have been absolutely stressed out at that point when he realised that they were keeping his phone. Because he would realise that, hey, they are looking at me really closely. Although, according to Jenn, he wasn't. According to her interview, he was totally oblivious to the fact that they were looking at him. Do you think, based on this interview, that he really was totally oblivious to the fact that they were looking at him? I don't think so. So there's some sort of disconnect here, and I don't know why Jenn is claiming that he didn't think that they were looking at him, unless it was their idea to say that because he's so innocent that he wouldn't consider that they were looking at him. Who knows? But honestly, the guy would have to be a complete half-wit if he didn't realise at this point in time that they were looking at him. And when you look at the way this interview went down, of course he knew they were looking at them. He kept adapting his narrative. Not only that, he kept up with this whole, I'm sorry, I'm trying, and then, oh, I haven't eaten since yesterday, and oh, I was just so tired, I don't know, and oh, I don't know where my head was. These are all excuses because he knows that they are asking him questions that he can't give answers to. He was trying his damnedest here to dance around the story, and he knew that they were looking at him.
Did the other detective give you his business card?
I believe so.
Okay, well here's mine, in case you want it for any reason.
Okay.
Okay? Do you swear that everything you told us is true?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for your time. We appreciate it. I know it's a little hectic right now. And then I know you were about to head somewhere. If you can just hang tight and refrain from going back in your car, please.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. I was actually going to move it over a spot.
No, just leave it here. It's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so that clears that up. I couldn't remember. I thought that it was Jen's car that they were sitting in for that 4-hour period of time before they were interviewed again and then headed off to the hotel. But yeah, so they've told him he can't get back in his car. I don't know why he was worrying about his car. I'm not sure that there's anything specific that was listed as being in there that was super incriminating. But who knows? But yeah, that makes it really clear that they were sitting in Jen's car for that period of time, not in his car. So I had planned on doing both the Detective Tagler interviews back to back, but honestly, this is already nearly 3 hours long. The second interview is 25 minutes long, which means that this could end up being a 4-hour video, which is all well and good, but I don't know how my iPad would go with processing a 4-hour video. It might start to have a bit of a meltdown, and it makes sense to me just to pause here and then do a shorter video tomorrow to cover the second interview that was done with Detective Tagler. But gives people a bit of processing time anyway. It gives me a bit of processing time. And we can come back to it and listen to the second interview tomorrow. So on that note, I'm really looking forward to reading your comments about this particular interview. There's been no redactions at all this time, other than Jen's name. So definitely it's a turnaround from what we originally had with these interviews. I will drop the uninterrupted version of this tomorrow morning my time, which would probably be, if you guys are listening to this morning, which some of you may be, it will probably be your afternoon by the time I drop the uninterrupted version. I get confused. It's so confusing. But there will be an uninterrupted version coming out after this one, before the next one comes out. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you are new, please subscribe to my channel. Also, please hit the like button and leave your comments below. As many of you will see, I've finally managed to catch up on replying to people's comments. I think we've finally got a routine where I can actually find time when the pup is asleep to reply to comments and not have my fingers chewed off. So on that note, I look forward to seeing your comments. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I've been good to